Hello everyone and welcome to the 21st episode of the Stack to E podcast. Today we have with us Kushal Pandya, who's a senior front-end engineer at GitLab. We will be primarily talking about the general front-end engineering landscape at GitLab and also touch upon how they manage remote work and also how they manage like a open source community, especially from a front-end engineering perspective. Hey, welcome Kushal Pandya and thanks a lot for taking the time.
Hi Manoj, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. Yeah, I've been senior front-end engineer at GitLab. I've been with GitLab for past close to 4 years now. GitLab being my first remote job. Prior to that, I worked for an enterprise HRMS company, which was based out of US but had offices in Pune. So I currently live in Pune, Maharashtra. And I've been working in the plan team within GitLab. So like GitLab has this entire DevOps lifecycle where there are different stages of the lifecycle like create, plan, verify, certify, security, monitoring, etc. So plan is one of the stages within the DevOps lifecycle, and I'm part of the plan team. Again, within plan team, there are two divergences depending on what product area a certain set of people work on. So there is this portfolio management, which is more inclined towards GitLab Enterprise Edition and larger customers. And there is this regular plan, which basically includes features like issue boards, which are available to GitLab FOSS Edition. So I primarily work on the enterprise edition side of things, and portfolio management essentially includes features like epics, roadmap.
Mm,
Roadmap is essentially a Gantt chart where
mm,
if you have a bunch of epics within a group, then you can basically visualize the timeline that it will take for a single epic. The feature is identical to what they have in Atlassian within Jira. So yeah, that's pretty much the department that I work in within GitLab. Apart from that, I'm also a maintainer for GitLab project itself. So I do a lot of code reviews, both from within GitLab, like from other front-end engineers, whenever they open merge request, or
mm.
more commonly called as PRs or pull request. So in GitLab's terminology, we call it merge request. So I review a lot of those front-end merge requests, both from within GitLab team members and from community contributors who want to contribute to GitLab. I am also merge request coach in case like someone is contributing to GitLab project for the first time. Then I walk them through the process, like how to go about making the changes, then how to open a merge request, which are the necessary people who needs to be assigned for reviews, etc. So yep,
All right, thanks a lot for the detailed introduction there.
yep,
So I was curious to know. So you mentioned that GitLab was your first remote company, right? So
yes.
before we go into the details of the front end and what you do at GitLab in more details, right? So how was that experience like? How was it going to a fully remote working environment? I think nowadays everyone
Yeah.
can say they are remote, but not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
everything has been equal. Not a lot of us were thrust into remote work without being fully prepared for it. So how was
Yes.
that experience been for you?
Yeah. So prior to GitLab, I worked for a company called Saba.
Mm,
I was in Pune and I worked for Saba for 4 years.
mm,
It was a traditional
mm,
software engineering job where I would have to commute to the office, work at the company, and return back. But as I started looking for opportunities, I already had a couple of my friends who were working remotely already for a year or two. So I kind of had the rough idea how remote work can feel like and how the typical routine is. Like you need to have a routine structured properly. You need to have a proper discipline regarding when you start your day and when you end your day. So those were the things and all the concerns I already had exposure to some extent through my friends. And around same time, my company was looking for a self-hosted Git solution. We were using a different version control system within the company. So then I found out about GitLab. I was already using GitHub for quite a while, but I haven't heard about GitLab. Like most of the people who had some idea about Bitbucket and GitHub due to the sheer popularity that both the projects had, but GitLab was not something I was very aware of. But then I found out I started exploring it, and then I came across the position. They were looking for a front end engineer, and I didn't really know how their hiring process worked in India because
mm,
most of my friends who were working remotely had a contractor structure where they would be acting as a contractors to their employers. But with GitLab, it was slightly different. Like they had a partnership within India where they would hire people, and people won't be contractors. They would essentially be employees, just that on paper they will be managed by an entity within India. So that was it. So for me, I think in my first year of GitLab, the transition was not as much easy. I started missing the water cooler conversation, as they call in the offices. Like when you commute to your office daily, you have this sense of social interactions that happen on daily basis, which is not the case. Like in case of remote, you would mostly be confined to your workspace. In some cases, if people are going to co-working locations, like in most of the cities where there are decent size of software companies, there are also co-working spaces where you can go and work with other people who are also working remotely. But for me, I had a workspace set up at my home, and I was starting to get hold of it. But at the same time, I started feeling that I was stretching quite a bit myself. Like I wouldn't realize that it was past 8:30 or 9 p.m. and I would still be working. So that was the kind of discipline that I didn't have at the beginning of my job. But as the times passed, as I learned from my colleagues within GitLab, like how they managed their day, it kind of helped me in establishing a proper routine, like when to start the day, how to structure throughout your day, how to basically allocate time to different activities throughout the day, and most importantly, not working on weekends. Like obviously, GitLab as a company never encourages to work on weekends. It is, even if it is a release, they very much encourage people not to stretch themselves, not working past certain hours or your work hours essentially. But like for me, it was something different. I was coming from a different background, different work culture, and for me, it was a paradigm shift in a way. I didn't have any experience working in this kind of company, so obviously it was a bit challenging to say the least. And by second year started, I kind of got hold into it, and right now it is very much formalized for me. Like I don't feel the burden of working remotely in any way. And even when lockdown started, I didn't feel any change, at least
Yeah.
in my lifestyle. Like the only difference was that I wasn't stepping out of my society. That was the only thing
Yeah.
that changed. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned things around trying to find like a proper work-life balance when you started out. Probably that's what a lot of us have been going through for the last 6, 7 months, trying to delineate between work and then the home time, right? I think
Yes. Yes.
probably many of us have figured it out, and some of us are still figuring out. Yeah, interesting that you had to face that same thing as well. So let's step into a bit of front end and then get back to more about conversation around remote later, around remote and front end in specific. So can we talk a bit about eye level front end stack at GitLab, more generally across GitLab and also with the specific work that you're doing?
Okay, okay. So GitLab is so the front end within GitLab is largely focused around Vue.js,
Mm.
and it has been a public knowledge. Like back in 2017 first half, or rather 2016 second half, where we finalized like what framework to go about. Before that, we were using a mixture of plain JavaScript and a bit of jQuery.
Mm.
We weren't using any popular jQuery plugins, but we were using jQuery as a DOM manipulation library while helping us in writing JavaScript that can be iterated upon fast enough. So in the beginning, obviously it was plain JavaScript, but as the complexity of the project grew, as we introduced more formal processes within the development, and the DevOps lifecycle introduced within the project, where we broke down individual functioning components within the project into specific feature categories, we realized what are the different types of front end applications that we would need within the project. And that's when we realized the need of a formal front end framework. And my first manager, who is no longer with GitLab, Jacob Schatz, he was front end lead back then. And when I joined, there were only like 6 or 7 front end engineers. Right now, the size of GitLab itself is like 1,200 team members. But when I joined, we were like close to 100 team members. So obviously, we didn't have functional departments. So the front end development process itself was pretty much agile in a way. Like we would iterate fast on the different product areas. But as we realized a need of a formal framework, we came to a conclusion like Vue.js suited the best for our needs. It wasn't bringing a huge monolith framework where we would have to use all the parts of the framework regardless of whether they are useful to us or not. Vue.js kind of proven to be a good balance between Angular, where there are a lot of things that framework brings, versus React, where React is just a presentation layer. So Vue.js kind of brought in a nice balance of having all the key things that you need in a front-end framework into the framework itself, while rest of the things like networking or data layer can be added as a different plugins within the Vue.js. So it is mostly Vue.js now, but we do have certain portions within GitLab project which are server-side rendered, and those portions are still rendered using Haml, because GitLab project itself is essentially a Ruby on Rails application, which means that the front-end views are written in Haml. So we still use Haml from time to time, especially in pages where there isn't a lot of user interaction, or there is not a lot of JavaScript type of logical, basically, execution taking place. So in those cases, we rely on Haml. But for the places where there is a lot of dynamic data updates which are happening within the page, we try to move them over to Vue. I think compared to early 2017, when we were still transitioning from Haml plus JavaScript plus jQuery Fusion over to Vue.js, the transition is like now close to 80% done. We still have some of the older areas of the project which are still written in Haml, but those areas still haven't required any need of introducing a framework, because the moment you start introducing framework application within the pages, you add a load of downloading a bundle for that page, and it essentially creates another layer or weight to the page. So in those regards, it is so in a nutshell, the things that we use at GitLab currently is plain JavaScript, Vue.js, and Haml. So yeah.
Good. Just to clarify a bit for people who may not be familiar with Vue, and also with people who may not be front-end engineers, right? When you say Vue came with the right components, are you talking specifically about the things like state management and router, which it comes with, or any other things that you have in mind?
So when it came to React, the stark difference between React and Vue.js is that the way you write templates and the way you separate out your JavaScript logic from your presentation logic. So in case of React, like most of us are aware that we would have to write JSX, and that would mean that you would combine plain JavaScript with a React's own mechanism of handling templates. When it came to Vue, it was much more natural that you would have a separate template tag within a .vue file, or a single file component as they are called in Vue.js, where you would write a template, and that template file would not have a lot of JavaScript within it. Like you can still access your state props or data objects within the template by within the curly brackets, but your core JavaScript stays isolated of that main template. And that was something that we liked about Vue when we decided to move with the Vue. And apart from that, like it allowed us to explore other parts which were way light compared to what React would have. Like the core bundle size that we would have just for the framework, if we included both Vuex and Vue, and Vue router in case the pages are requiring some form of routing mechanism, the core bundle download size was much smaller compared to what we would have with React and Angular. So that was the motivation, that we didn't want a really heavy framework, especially when we are just getting started to write our applications into a front-end framework. So that was the idea, because up until that point, we were still writing plain JavaScript, and we didn't want to discard all of it, or rather have a bundle size that would include both a framework weight as well as the core JavaScript that we had written already. So that was the idea that we liked about Vue.
All right, makes sense. So going a bit about general life cycle of development, right? So how do you generally go about developing new features to your application, and then go about testing it and then releasing? What is the general, say we can think about talking about the end-to-end CD process in GitLab? What is your development process like? So could
Okay.
you give a bit of details on
So,
that?
back in late 2017, our CEO, Sid Brandy, who is GitLab CEO, we basically coined a process which was competing with Agile, but it was very different from Agile. We called it conversational development. And the motto of this particular development methodology was idea to production, where everything would start as a plain idea. And to put it in technical terms, if someone comes up with an idea which is suitable for the product, they would get the conversation started within an issue. They would create an issue, get all the ideas out there within issue description. The rest of the stakeholders, which are concerned about that particular product area, which is going to be impacted by this proposed idea, would chime in. The discussion would start. And based on the discussion, we would come up with a finalization of how the first iteration should look like. One of our values within GitLab is to have a boring solution. So we don't want to come up with a product idea where the first iteration itself is so much complicated that we would be spending months just to have it finalized and be something that lives within the production. So the idea was to basically, whatever feature that we want to start work on, we would have a bare minimum version of it, or an MVP essentially, as a first iteration. We would have the conversation started. Then as things get more concrete regarding the details of it, we would have UX engineers who would participate in providing the designs of how these needs to be looked. Then once the UX is finalized, we would have front-end and back-end engineers chiming in, providing their thoughts, like how feasible it is to develop this from the back-end perspective as well as the front-end perspective. And once like all the things are finalized, like how to go about developing it, we would start collaborating on the development of it. For most cases, like if it is a simple feature, it really starts with both front-end and back-end engineer working on a single merge request. And if it is a complicated feature that we feel that it requires some foundational work on the back-end level before front-end can even start, we would at least start at least a 1 or 2 releases before we actually want this thing to be in the production. So like GitLab releases on every 22nd of the month. So currently our development duration for a specific release happens between 23rd of the month to 17th of the month. So these dates are again not concrete. We did explore different ways to do about it. But right now it is kind of a rough duration in which we develop for a specific GitLab release. And by 17th of the month, whatever features which have been merged into master, if they are stable enough, then we ensure that those things land into the release that happens on 22nd of the month. At the same time, GitLab.com basically gets fresh deployments from master branch of GitLab into the production on like every 1 or 2 days, depending on how stable the master branch is. So those are the structure. Now going back to like how formal development process happens. So as I said, like when we started around, we didn't have functional departments, but now we do, which means that every functional department has a product manager who is interacting with GitLab customers, paying customers, as well as general GitLab community, like what is the sentiment about a specific feature? What are the things that we can include within GitLab? So product managers have more clear picture of what is there, which is needed within the product. And based on the ideas that product managers come up with, we have weekly meetings within each functional department. Like, for example, I work in a plan team. So we have a plan weekly meeting happening every week where we discuss about any existing features that we are already working on, evolution of that feature, as well as any upcoming features which are coming in from multiple customers or general set of GitLab users who are feeling the need of such a feature. So based on that, we come to an ideation duration where product managers would provide us a rough idea of how the feature needs to be. Then they collaborate with front-end engineers, back-end engineers, as well as UXers to come up with a design of it. And that's how the development process starts. And as I said, like if I'm working on a feature which is scheduled for a specific release, then we try that the feature, even in its bare minimum iteration, gets merged before 17th of the month. In case it misses a release, we push it to the next release and continue working on that feature until we feel that the quality of that feature matches with what we have in mind. And regarding the technical side of development process, like as I said, both backend and front-end engineers as well as UXers will work on a single merge request at times if the feature is small enough. In case of larger features, we would split the effort into multiple merge requests. And as the development starts, we obviously start with the main source of the feature, like we would write. So if it requires writing Vue.js, then we would do that. Once the feature is complete, front-end engineers are also responsible for all the front-end tests. So we use a combination of Jest as well as Vue test utils to do our front-end testing. And in case a feature requires more integration testing, then we would use RSpec, because RSpec is something that backend also uses to test the Ruby code that is introduced for the feature. So on the front end, we use a combination of front end testing using Jest as well as some form of RSpec in case we need that the entire page user interaction needs to be tested. So once the tests are complete, obviously it gets assigned to reviewers. So we have a two-layer review process where the first layer is to basically assign a reviewer who would do an initial review of the entire merge request and provide the feedback. And any front-end engineer within GitLab is allowed to review a code. There is no restriction or an eligibility criteria, because reviewers are groomed to become maintainers at some point in time. So it is important that they get exposure to as much code as they can, which is not written by them. So that is the first layer of review. Once reviewer is happy with the changes which are done in the merge request, it gets assigned to maintainer who would have a final say on whether this can be merged or not. And like I said, each code area, be it backend or front end or database change, would have different set of reviewers and maintainers. Like as I said, I maintain GitLab products. So what I mean is that I maintain from front end perspective. So if I get a merge request coming my way for review, I would review front end changes within that merge request and add my approval. And in case it has no other change apart from front end, then I get to merge it. If it has a backend changes as well, I would assign to backend maintainer, and backend maintainer gets to review backend changes. And once all the necessary approvals are in, it gets merged. So that is kind of a multi-layer review process. So that is like start to end development workflow.
All right. One thing that I wanted to ask is, so there is generally in the continuous delivery and DevOps literature, right, there is this concern around doing async code reviews, right? Where
Yes.
there is expectation to do it more synchronous way, and with especially you mentioning like there is multi-layer and with so as that sort of like something of a pain point, or has it worked out?
So that working asynchronously obviously has some downsides, especially when and that happens both from the start of the process as well as end of the process. Like GitLab right now is spread across 65 countries, which means that there is always a time zone during weekdays where some or the other person within GitLab is working for the company. So that means like work happens 24 hours a day. So due to that, what happens is that you cannot really control on who you get to collaborate with within the team. Like within a team, your team members would be from an entirely different time zones. So like currently I'm working on a feature where I'm collaborating with my colleague who is based out of Brazil, which means that the time zone difference between India and Brazil is directly 12.5 hours. So for me, whatever changes that I need from his side, I would have to wait for half a day to get the process done. And same thing happens to vice versa. So the time zone collaboration is something that is not easy to solve. But at the same time, within the company, we have this culture of not directly encouraging and getting into Slack DMs or encouraging directly into asking like, hey, can we jump on call and discuss this about 1 hour? Obviously, there are some times when you need to do that. Like, for example, if you need to have some sort of architectural discussion, like how to go about a specific feature, it may be a good idea to jump on a video call and discuss with the person. But for day-to-day processes, like doing reviews, providing suggestions within for the code changes that are done, we encourage doing those asynchronously. If a merge request comes my way for review, I would review it, assign it back to the author of the merge request, and I wouldn't expect that author to come back with updated changes immediately. That is not the expectation I want to set, and vice versa is also true, where if I'm asked to do certain changes, the person is not expecting me to come up with those changes right away. So that way we kind of make it easier to do cross time zone collaborations. But like you said, working asynchronously can only work if all the parties who are involved are willing to do it. If some person feels that it is much more easier for them to speak or interact synchronously, by getting into the call or in the chat, then it kind of breaks the process entirely. Fortunately, within GitLab, all team members are very well versed of this process. And that kind of makes it much easier to work on larger features which span across multiple weeks of development. Like I mentioned, the colleague that I'm working with, I've been working with him on this feature for past 1.5 months. And I haven't really felt that this time zone gap is kind of slowing us down. So in a way, it is both positive and negative, depending on how well you get used to the process and do it.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I think when everyone is tuned to working in the same way, and then I've been also trained
Yeah.
to do that, I think it works out much better than being just thrown into it, which is the situation that we are finding mostly right now.
Yeah.
And I think all remote is also a good situation to have rather than like an hybrid situation where some of them are remote, some of them are working out of an office and so on,
Yeah.
right?
In fact, hybrid model is kind of anti-remote in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think either you become full remote company or you
Hmm.
don't become one at all.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is no middle ground because satellite offices do not really work when
Hmm.
people are at home and
Oh,
they
yeah.
were to work with set of people who are in the office.
Hmm.
Because what would happen is you would have a meeting where one or two people are at home. You would have to dial in from a conference room from your office,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
kind of breaks the process. And I've had a
Hmm.
chance to experience it firsthand with my previous company,
Hmm.
where if some or the other team member decides to work from home, even for a day within a week,
Hmm.
we would have our scrum calls on daily basis, and the person would be dialed in via phone within our conference meeting,
Hmm.
and that kind of didn't really feel natural to do
Hmm.
such kind of meetings. So
Hmm.
obviously it is much better to have entire team remotely so that
Hmm.
everyone is understands like how
Hmm.
to go about it. So,
Hmm. Yeah, continuing on, right? So you mentioned something about the release happens on the 22nd, but if
yes.
something is not making it, then it goes to the next one, right? So could you
Yeah.
touch a bit upon the release strategy that is happening yet? Like I know that there is the GitLab flow. Is that what you're following? Are there things like feature toggling that you do? How does it look like?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
So
from a front-end perspective. Yeah.
yeah. So we do have a concept of feature flags. So
Hmm.
obviously, like when you work on really large features
Hmm.
or rather large changes to an existing feature,
Hmm.
doing those in a release without having a way to revert it within
Hmm.
the production within a matter of
Hmm.
seconds is
Hmm.
not a good idea. So
Hmm.
2 years ago, we started working on a feature flag structure within GitLab,
Hmm.
where we introduced backend changes,
Hmm.
which allowed us to work on features which can be behind a flag, and we can enable it either for entire instance within the production or a certain project or a certain group or certain set of people within entire user base. So we do have that form of A/B testing for individual features, and the way it works is that any large feature that we start working on, it by default happens behind feature flag. That is the basic idea because we don't want to cause any regressions within GitLab.com. Now that master branch gets deployed regularly within GitLab.com. Earlier, that wasn't the case. Like when I joined the company, releases would still happen on 22nd of the month, but deployments within production would also happen on 22nd of the month. Then we introduced a process where there would be a release candidate stage where there would be a duration of a week right before 22nd, where we would start deploying RC builds to upcoming release. And RC builds would get deployed on daily basis. And by 22nd of the month, we would deploy the final build for that month's release. And going forward, until we encounter next RC, we would only update production with patch releases or security releases. So that was the idea. But as we grew as a company, as more features were started worked upon, it felt natural to have a rolling release model, at least for GitLab.com, where there would still be a way to go back for a specific users. Like today, if you go to GitLab.com, you would notice that on the left side of the page within the main navigation, there is a next badge
Hmm.
next to the GitLab logo. So that next badge essentially allows you to switch from main production releases to the canary releases. So we do have different deployment environments. We have a staging environment, we have a canary environment, and we have production. So if any build gets deployed to a either canary first and then next to staging, we would have a rough idea of how the feature works. We have a proper verification process for each feature that individual has worked on. So like there is this GitLab bot that we use internally within the company, which does a lot of heavy lifting for our day-to-day workflow. So as I mentioned earlier, like during reviews, we would assign reviewer for the first layer review and then maintainer for the final review. So GitLab bot, what it does is that it would leave a comment for any merge request that we open, and it would basically randomly select a reviewer and a maintainer closer to your time zone, and depending on what product area you touched upon while working on this merge request. And your job becomes easier as you would have to just assign that person whatever the bot has mentioned. Apart from that, GitLab bot also does normal chores like opening a review or a verification issue at the end of a certain deployment. So for example, I worked on a merge request which gets merged, like which got merged 2 days ago, and a deployment happened yesterday. So the moment deployment happened on either staging or Canary, GitLab bot would open an issue. It would mention all the merge requests which were included for a specific deployment, and it would also mention all the authors for that merge request. So I would get a notification within my to do within GitLab. I would visit that verification environment, see like whether it got deployed on staging or production. Depending on how the feature is behaving in those environments, I would leave a comment and mark my task list within that issue that I've done the verification, feature is working fine. And based on the task list completion, GitLab bot would basically close that issue, and our release managers would know that, okay, this build is good enough to get deployed in production. And that's how we deploy it on production. Now, regarding the dates, like on 17th of the month, as I said, that whatever work that needs to be done happens on 17th of the month. So what we do is that we would tag a release build on 17th of the month. Then the tag gets updated in case something critical comes up between 17th of the month to the 22nd of the month. And if it doesn't happen, then we would just deploy whatever release that we tagged, and we would basically continue to test it in our staging and Canary, and eventually on production. And by the 22nd of the month, we would do the release and create different builds for different operating systems. Like GitLab is primarily used as a self-hosted solution for a lot of companies and people. So we would have to do releases to like our Debian repository, then our Omnibus repository, or our Docker container repository. So all those releases get out on 22nd of the month as a final build. And obviously, like there is a release candidate stage between 17th and 22nd. So RC builds also happen around that time.
Sounds good. So the other aspect that I want to touch is GitLab is obviously open source also, right? So how are you managing working with the community? I think in a sense, since you're already remote and working with, say, 1,000 people, it now just extends it to tens of thousands of people that you have to work with in the same asynchronous way. And you can think of them all also as the remote employees in a way. So how has that been? Like, how has it been to manage the contributions from the whole community?
Yeah, so the flow of community contributions is quite huge, and that increased quite a bit around hackathon. So like we do a hackathon every once in a while where there are a lot of low-hanging fruit issues that community members can contribute on. So as I said that we have a concept called merge request coach, and who these people are essentially the people who will act as a first line of review / maintain for those incoming community contributions. And we have our dedicated team members who work with community members in getting the entire interaction between GitLab team or GitLab as a company and community contributions smoother. So that kind of makes it much easier to handle the flow of contributions which happen on regular basis. So like we have a label called community contributions. So as I said, like GitLab bot does a lot of heavy lifting within GitLab. So that bot would basically tag all the merge requests with relevant labels depending on from where the merge request is coming. Like if it is coming from a fork, which means that it is coming from a community contributor. So it would apply all the necessary labels. It would also apply labels based on what code area that merge request touches. And we have the bot itself is coded in a way that it is aware that this code area belongs to this particular department or this functional area. So it would also add relevant labels to that functional area as well. So for example, if a community contribution happened around epics, then the bot would know that this belongs to plan team. So it would add relevant labels for plan team as well. And team members within plan have already subscribed to those labels. So they would know that, okay, something come up with this label, either an issue or a merge request. So we would already get notified for those contributions. So on a bird's eye view, you would feel that there are thousands of contributions happening within GitLab. But once these contributions are bifurcated into different departments, it becomes much easier to narrow down our work and handle the flow more easily. And like I said, that along with me, there are other merge request coaches as well who spend an hour or two from their day to look at all the community contributions that have happened, would leave a review on them. If the changes are small enough that they can be approved right away, then they get approved and get merged immediately. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So a general front-end question. So what are the plans for upgrading to Vue 3?
So some of the team members within GitLab that we have are also part of Vue core team.
Oh, good
So
to know.
like all the work that has happened or has gone into Vue 3 release, we kind of had a first-hand information like what are the depreciation plans and what are the areas within GitLab that might get impacted and might hinder our upgrade path. So since last 6 or 7 months, we had a formal front-end guideline in place, like what are the things that we would allow going forward within merge request. So for example, mixins are depreciated in Vue 3. So like 6 months ago, we stopped encouraging any use of mixins. Like if any merge request comes my way for review, if I notice that it uses mixins, I would encourage author to not use mixin. And for a time being, they can probably move it out to a reusable functional component, or rather move it to a simple util file or a plain JS file if there are pure functions. And if it is not something that cannot be put in a separate file, then they can just leave the code within the component and not worry about mixins. So those were the small things that we were already aware of, like how to go about upgrading. And meanwhile, there are some internal merge requests where we just wanted to test waters by just doing the upgrade of Vue 3 and see what are the things that broke. And that would give us clearer idea of what are the things that we should be worried about the most during upgrade. So we already have work for the upgrade going on for months. So that allows us to do much more natural transition. But obviously it is still going to take some time. Like we cannot do day one upgrades, not at the size that GitLab operates at. So we would have to wait for another couple of weeks before we can finally do the upgrade button. Like remembering the upgrade that we did from Bootstrap 3 to Bootstrap 4, like GitLab still uses Bootstrap, although we are trying to move away from Bootstrap as much as possible, but it is still there. And before we had Bootstrap 4 in production, Bootstrap 3 was much more heavily used. We didn't have as much custom CSS for at least layout purposes. So that upgrade gave us a better idea of how to go about doing such major upgrades, how to plan it properly. So we learned our lessons there. And based on that, we are formulating an upgrade strategy now. So, yeah.
Yes, it was good to know that the work has already started for a while at least, and there are also core contributors here. I think that's to be expected at this stage, right? Yeah. And so any specific Vue 3 features that you're looking forward to? And have you started using things like the white build tool, local build tool for development?
So far, like to be really honest, I haven't really had a chance to try out Vue 3 myself. Like I'm probably as much aware as a normal front-end engineer would be regarding Vue. Like they have a concept of there is a term I have forgotten, but there is a term which basically allows us to reuse existing portions. So yeah, so that is as much of awareness that I have. Although I am aware that what are the things not to do right now so that our upgrade process for Vue 3 is smoother. But yeah, so far I haven't really had a chance to explore like what are the smaller features that Vue 3 has introduced. Yeah.
Cool. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Kushal. Those are all the questions that I had to ask you. I think you have given a pretty detailed view on the general work practices at GitLab and also more from a front end perspective. It was pretty insightful. Thanks a lot
Yep.
for taking the time again.
Yep. Nice. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. See you.